All right, Gaui Nation, we're back building step 2 of the Gaui NEX6 nitro or electric helicopter, either nitro or 6S or 12S. Out of the box it's 6S. Right now we're going to assemble the frame as a 6S. And then at the end of the build videos I'll go back and build mine into the nitro that it's going to be with the OS50. For this step, you're going to need a 2mm and a 2.5mm hex. As you see, I like my Scorpion Performance drivers, as well as my Scorpion mat. It helps keep from losing screws. We're going to need 10 of the 3x20, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, 6 of the 3x6, 4 of the these are the M3x8s. These are also the 3x8s, but these are the countersunk heads. I believe they have a 0 in front of the part number on those. I could be backwards on those two. I apologize for that. Front electronic mounts, both the side mounts for the electronics. Need 6 of the small frame spacers, 3 of the medium frame spacers. These are threaded on the inside. And 1 of the longest frame spacers also threaded on the inside. Your electric motor mount, the bottom bearing plate for the main shaft, and then the 2 longer white plastic frame spacers, as well as your lower frame sets. Any of the screws that you use that go into metal should be Loctited. I'll keep repeating that in every step. I have pre-Loctited everything so you guys don't have to sit and watch that. My typical way of going about this is I'm going to use one piece kind of towards the center to get the frame halves together so that I can stand and work on them. That in this case is going to be our bearing block. Now if you look at this bearing block, you can see there is a top and a bottom. The bottom is where the bearing actually went in. The top is more of a finished edge. So make sure you get that right. Now if we look at the instructions, it shows that you've got 3x6 screws going into both sides. So we're going to go into these holes right here by the dip in the frame, and we'll get started with that. All right. So this particular build, I'm going to go with the Demon Axon. By far my favorite flybarless system, excuse me. Running a Futaba radio system. The two work hand in hand real well. I'm still fighting the urge to pull the expert servos out of my NX7 to put in this. And I'm probably not going to, just because the NX7 is flying so great with, again, the Futaba system and the Demon Axon and those expert servos. I just don't have it in the financing right now to spend the money on the expert servos, so I'm probably going to end up pulling some high-techs out of an older frame that I got to put into this for now until I can get those experts. I will have experts in this helicopter. So the OS50 is going to be the main power plant in mine. I had that in one of my other helicopters. I'm not going new on that. It runs just fine, and I don't need to worry too much about that. I'm going to leave those loose. I'll come back here in a little bit and we'll tighten those up. Next thing we're going to do is actually put this front frame spacer in. If we look at our instructions, it goes right underneath where the plastic battery tray is going to go. So it's going to go right here in this hole right underneath that servo block. So it goes in, and again, 3x6 screws, nothing crazy. Hand tighten for now, and it'll hold it in place. This other side in. This is actually the easiest part of this step of the build. Once we get to putting the upper half on, it gets a little trickier because you got to get the frame spacers in there in the right spots, and that makes it a little more tricky. All right, so we got those just hand tightened in there. Next thing we're going to do is our electronics mount. Again, if we look at our picture, you can see that the wedge shape goes into the frame right above that spacer we just did, and it uses the plastic 3x8s, the self-tapping screws that go in the holes. Now, previously, one of a previous team member and friend had given me advice that anytime you go into plastic, you want to use some super glue or CA on these. I've personally never had a problem unless I over tightened them and stripped them out with these screws ever coming out or holding. So I don't do that, but if you do have issues with these backing out on you, that's something you can do. Just a dab of CA or super glue in there will help those stay in place. Whenever I'm using Loctite on stuff such as, you know, metal to metal, like you should always do, I'm constantly putting Loctite on, but I do it ahead of time and let it dry. Less mess, you don't have it squishing out around the bolts. It just takes a dab, and then you tighten up your bolts and you don't have to crank down on them real hard. Just snug them up and let the Loctite do its job. Then you don't strip heads when you go to take it out either if you don't crank them down so hard. I just use the blue Loctite on 99% of everything I do. All right, so we've got those 4 bolts in holding this front electronics mount. Now we're going to do these side ones real quick. They just go on the side here like this, but they're using the countersunk head. You can see the beveled edge that's in there to make it a nice finish for the electronics to sit down on there. And these, the last 4 screws and these 4 screws are your 2mm hex driver. So real nice and easy start in there. No problems at all. And that's one side. Now, as you can see, nice and flush, no problem with mounting electronics on there. Get the other side in real quick, and then we can actually get into mounting the upper frame to the lower frame. I did want to mention in the first video when I put the belt pulley on to the shaft that goes through the bearing and has the gear drive on the bottom, I didn't talk too much about it. There's actually 2 sets of holes in the top of that shaft. You need to mount that pulley, and if you give me just a second here, I'll pull it over here where we can see. This pulley down in here, there's actually 2 sets of holes. I don't know if I can find a good angle. Maybe right here. There's an upper hole, then there's a lower hole, and those lower holes is where those set screws kind of wiggle down into. There's a bearing plate that goes in here later, so if you put that pulley too high, it's going to let that gear drive set low, and you're not going to have room for that pulley block on top. Just not going to work well for you. So I did want to mention that has to kind of pinch down on that mount or it won't work right. All right, so we got all the stuff that's going into our lower frame at this point in here. I'm just going to snug up the stuff that I only finger tightened real quick. The next step, we're going to use the plastic bearing spacers with our 3x20s. Okay, now if we look at our instructions again, you can see in the picture the round edges go to the top. So what I do is I start by just getting the 3x20 through, but just flush with that back edge. If I'm talented enough to do it. All right, there we go. Now, what's going to happen is once we get this frame set in here, it's going to set down like this. This frame spacer is going to set inside the frame, and it's going to thread into those. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure I'm using the right holes, and I am. I'm actually going to try to get this to set in here because this frame's tight enough. It should hold it in place enough that we don't have to fight too much with it once we set it down in there. As long as we're real careful and real light with it, I think we can get it started. Oh, we're moving it already. With a little bit of patience, which is not my forte. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, patience is not something that's great for me, which helicopters probably isn't the smartest thing to do when you don't have a lot of patience. But, you know, gotta have some fun somehow, right? All right. See if we went on this one. I'm not sure if I'm winning, so we're gonna flip it over here so we can actually see what we got going on here. I'm definitely not winning on this back block. So here's the first step. What is it? All right, guys. We need the 2.5s for these. I think I got the front one started. Yep, I've got the front one started. We're going to just take it down to where it's almost all the way, but not quite. Then we're going to go back to this back one. Just can't quite seem to get it to cooperate. There we go. All right. So that's the big pain on these is just going to be getting your stuff started going through the frame into these the frame spacers. Once you get past that, it's not too horrible of a deal. Again, we got a lot of these little spacers to deal with. All the rest of the screws or bolts are going to be these 3x20s using that 2.5mm driver. But now that we got the other side started, this should go pretty straightforward because everything should be aligned. As long as you didn't tighten it all too hard on the other side, that should go straight through and start. Already pre-Loctited, already good to go. All right, so there's those. Again, we're building this as if it were going to be a 6S machine, so I am installing the engine mount in here. That being said, I am going to end up doing the nitro build in the end, but I'm doing this for you 6S guys. I'm going to assemble it as a 6S machine so you can see where the battery sits, so you can see how the engine mount goes in, and then I'll do a final video where we actually, or maybe a few videos where we do the conversion over to the nitro kit. So if you decided that you wanted to switch over down the road, you have that option as well, and hopefully that video will help. So lost my pliers, guys, sorry. Next step gets kind of the same deal. And actually I'm going to take a step back. We do need 4 spacers for this, the small spacers. We need your engine mount. If you look at your picture, that engine mount, you can see these grooves face up. All right. So what's going to happen, we need 4 of our 3x20s for this step. We're actually going to take this bearing block. This is one of my tips for you guys. Put a bolt in caddy corner. Don't worry about the spacers. Do one through this corner. I'm going to turn it on the side here so I can try to get it at an angle where you can see what I'm doing here. All right, so we're going to get it started. Yeah, if I can get it to start. All right, so there's that one started. Okay, you don't need to take it in that far. Now the next one will go easier because we've already got started. Now we did a front bolt here. We're going to do a back bolt here. All right, that levels out that plate sitting down in there. If I can get it where it won't cross thread. All right, and these are all 2.5s again. We're going to take this and backspace it. There we go. All right. Now that plate's in there nice and level where you don't have to screw with it too much because these spacers are going to go in here in between your upper and lower half. So it gets to be a little ridiculous when you're trying to balance the spacer, the engine mount, and try to get your bolt through and get it started. So now that we've got those front and rears to hold our mount, now we can just mess with going through and getting the spacer in the right place. and dropping it, which I do a lot of, so I apologize for the delay here, but everybody's got their pluses and minuses on building these. This is one of my minuses, but I'll get there. If you guys have any tips or tricks on doing these, don't hesitate to send me the tips and tricks. I'll be happy to mention it. And the whole purpose of this is to help you guys so you can see how to assemble this NEX6. Number one, the instructions are a little intimidating. I don't know if we can see that real well, guys, but there's that spacer. I got the 3x20 going through into the block. Now these back ones are a little easier. It's you can reach them a little easier. I'm using pliers just so my hands aren't necessarily in your way on these back ones, so you can kind of see. Maybe I am. I'll grab that one back in a second. All right. So that's nice and snug. I can probably work that. Yep, and it'll stay right there, and then I can get that through no problem. See? Nothing to the rear ones. All right, so now, again, we don't want to over tighten those just yet. We'll go back and finish tightening after this whole step's said and done. All right, we're going to pull that one out. First time I put this together, I just kind of worked it like this. I put it in there, and then I used my hex driver to kind of get it down into place. Once I was getting close, I kind of watched to make sure that you can see through. That's really close. Right there, I should be pretty darn close. Yep, right through. There we go. So we need our 2.5 mil again. Run that in. All right, so the last front one, or excuse me, rear one, it's pretty easy to do. And if I can get it started in there, because I might have over tightened some of this. I might have to loosen up those blocks if I can't get this started, but not too far that time. I got it started, but it pushed on through. All right, there we go. Now we're getting somewhere. Definitely shoot me some comment, guys, and let me know what you think of the videos, what I can do to improve. Hopefully this one's better than the first without having the headband on with the GoPro. I really fought with the GoPro, so figured out a different way to do the video. I'm using my phone now. Hopefully it's a little less shaking. You can just see me shaking instead of the camera shaking on top of how bad I shake. All right, so there, we've got our electric engine mount in. I'm just going to snug those up just to the point that they're just touching. I'm not going crazy on them yet. And I'll go back and finish tightening after we get everything else done. So right now, we've got 2 more of our 3x20s left. We've got 2 more of the small frame spacers left and 1 of the medium threaded frame spacers. So if we look at our picture here, it looks as if there's our small spacer. It's going to go in through the hole just forward of oh, that's the wrong one. I apologize, guys. That's the one that's already in there through the bearing blocks. So which one is that? Now I got my You know what, guys? I think those actually go in a different section. No, let's see here, because I got that one. Oh, you know what? They go right here, guys. I apologize. Frame spacer right above your engine mount block. So we're going to do kind of like we did first time. We're going to start just by getting right through the frame spacer, the smaller ones in the side, and just get our bolt started in there. Find that sweet spot. There it is. Right now we can take our medium-sized one Find the spot that it starts. There we go. And again, same thing on the other side. We're going to get our small one started in between the frames. And get the 3x20 through there, locked into place. And there we go, guys. That's step 2. So now I'm going to go through and just snug everything up. Again, remember, you don't have to crank these things down. You've got Loctite on the metal to metal. Let the Loctite do its job. Just snug these up. You're not trying to crush that carbon. You're not trying to crush these spacers. You're not trying to strip out those threads. And you want to be able to take this thing apart the next time you have a crash or you're doing maintenance, and you don't want to strip out anything. You don't want to fight with stripped heads. So make sure just to take your time, enjoy the build. Don't rush stuff, don't overpower stuff. Do it right. That way you know darn well that you won't have issues when you go to take this thing apart for maintenance, or if by chance you have that horrible crash, or you're running a nitro and you get the chicken dance. We all hope that doesn't happen, but it happens to the best of us. So there you go, guys. Step 2, please let me know what you think. Step 3 coming soon, which I believe, if we flip the paper over here, is landing gear. It's going to be probably a 2-part deal, because we got the main shaft coming in with the lower gear, and then we also have the landing gear selection with the battery mount. So let me know, guys. Hope you get out and get your Gaui grin. Thank you, Gaui Nation. Appreciate it.